Hello, MCU fans. Today we're going to take a look at Quantumania's placement on the Disney Plus timeline. And I will say up front, it is not where I expected it to be. Not even close. And it seems from talking to others, they felt the same. And so after a couple days of lots of discussions, both on the Discord server for this channel, but also the Discord server for the MCU Cinematic Universe Wiki, which you know I love that thing if you've watched any of my earlier videos, lots of discussions, I think I've finally come to a place where I get it, I see what they're doing, and perhaps there's even a plan behind it. So let's dive right in and see what we can find out. All right, so first I want to talk about a couple things from the movie that I found interesting on my second watch of the movie. At first I thought it was a pretty big plot hole that in Ant-Man and the Wasp, they sent poor Scott into the quantum realm. In fact, of all people, Janet sent him in, even though we know it's very, very dangerous. And she knows it's very dangerous. But rewatching the movie and then watching this scene again, I think I'm okay with it. Because notice, she does give him a lot of warnings. Stay out of the tardigrade fields. They're cute, but they'll eat you. And don't get sucked into a time vortex. We won't be able to save you. So she does give him a lot of warnings. Note that none of them were, oh, by the way, there's this really powerful guy named Kang and he'll kill you. She doesn't say that, but she does give him a lot of warnings. But I think the most important thing is he was supposed to be in there for like 10 seconds. When I rewatched that scene, I have forgot. They send him in, he gets some of the particles, the healing particles to help Ghost, and then they try to get him right back out again. And they obviously send him to somewhere way, way far away from Kang. So on rewatch, I think I'm okay with this. I don't think it's a plot hole. I still thought it was weird that Janet didn't tell anybody about her time in the quantum realm, but I don't think it in any way impacts this particular scene. This scene makes sense. So, okay, cool. Also, I think it's interesting looking at some of the things we learn about the quantum realm. There's been this question of, is there one quantum realm for the entire multiverse, or is there a quantum realm in every universe? Well, they kind of canonize some of the things I've seen in interviews. Janet says it's a place outside time and space. Makes sense. It's a secret universe. Note she uses the word universe beneath ours. Now, I'll say a couple things. Number one, they keep using different terms for the same thing, and it's driving me crazy. So it's the quantum realm, or is it the quantum universe? But anyway, more importantly is, she's literally calling it a universe, and she's saying it's beneath ours. Well, if it's beneath 616, the MCU, then it's also beneath the rest of the multiverse, right? So it seems like she's saying there's only one quantum realm for the entire multiverse. And that's what we've seen in interviews. Loveness said it's the basement of the Marvel Cinematic Universe's multiverse. So I think Janet's quotes seem to back that up. This isn't just him saying it in an interview. The movie seems to establish that. So let me know what you think in the comments. Do you think there's more than one quantum realm or not? I have a longer video I did on the multiverse in general, and I talk about this particular thing in a lot more depth, so you can check out that video if you're interested. But I just thought it was neat to see that Quantumania seems to codify this idea that there's only one quantum realm, or quantum universe, as the case may be. Speaking of terminology, how do they describe the multiverse? Well, when Janet brings it up, Hank says, as in alternate dimensions, parallel realities. What's weird to me is he didn't say as in alternate universes, because that's what I would have said. The multiverse is composed of multiple universes, but he immediately jumps to dimensions and realities. So now we've used the term dimension, reality, and realm, like the quantum realm. 3 different words. They seem to be interchangeably used. Then later in the movie, Janet talks about the fact that Kang wipes out multiple timelines. She doesn't say universes, she says timelines. That's interesting. So are they saying there's a difference between a timeline and a universe? I personally don't think so, but nonetheless, it is just a little confusing that they keep interchangeably using these words, and I do hope eventually we get to a point where they define each of these terms and explain what means what. And in fact, I'm going to do a video, this is maybe a tease for an upcoming video I've been thinking about for a while, where I talk about the different realms, the different dimensions, the dark dimension, the Noor dimension, on and on and on, and how they all relate to the multiverse and to the MCU. So I think it's a really interesting topic, but I'm just saying they are pretty loose with the terminology, and I hope that it gets a little tighter as they move along. Okay, one thing I did think was very tight, though, from a timeline standpoint, was Janet's time in the quantum realm. So she establishes in the movie that she spent 30 years. And then again, they say down there. I just think that's so interesting that it's down, but nonetheless, that it's down, that she spent 30 years down there. Well, that makes sense, right? Because we learned in 1987 from flashbacks in both Ant-Man and Ant-Man the Wasp that she went into the quantum realm in 1987, and she comes out in 2018. Well, that could technically be 31 years, but depending on when each of the movies happened and all that, around it's 30, right? So I love that. That's consistent. She was down there 30 years. But one thing that's come up is, what did she do during those 30 years? When did Kang come in during those 30 years? Maybe it doesn't matter, but it's still interesting to think about. Well, they give us some pretty good clues. Huge thanks to BEJT and his work over on the MCU Wiki Discord. Dude is the research man of the universe. He's incredible. But so he listened to and found the Empire Spoiler Special, which was a podcast with Reed and Loveness. I believe it was a protected one. You had to be a member to get to this podcast because I can't reach it online myself. So huge thanks to BJT for taking down some of these quotes. Well, this is interesting. Reed says, announcing early on that this is going to be a very different tone for the Ant-Man movies. We designed the idea that somewhere, say 21, 22 years into Janet's 30 years down there, she'd given up hope, right? And then he leads on to say more, but the point is, he's about to say, and Kang arrives. So that's kind of fun. Think about it for a second. She goes in 1987. Let's go with 21 years. What's 1987 plus 21? 2008, the beginning of the MCU. That's just kind of cool to think that at the same time Stark's movie came out, where it's placed in the MCU timeline, everybody can debate. But I do think it's looking like it's moving towards 2008 from some leaks of the timeline book. But nonetheless, at least the movie came out. We all know that in 2008. So at the same time Stark's saying, I am Iron Man, boom, Kang is being shot into the quantum realm. That's pretty cool. So let's look and see what the movie tells us. It doesn't give us specifics, but it fits with that 21 years because she seemed to have been alone in the quantum realm for a long time. She says after so many years alone, it was nice to have a friend. Okay, very cool. So we'll go with 21 years because that's what Reed has said. Okay, so how long did they work on the multiversal engine core? Well, she says it took ages. Well, if we're already 21 years into a 30-year time in the quantum realm, it can't be too long. And she didn't say years, she said ages, so maybe we're talking more like months, and she's just frustrated it took as long as it did. The bottom line is they're both very smart. So I'm guessing this didn't take too long, but we don't really know. We just know it took some time. And then she says, I spent years fighting him, running from him, and hiding from him. Of course, that's after she, destroys his multiversal core and takes off. So it seems like there was a decent amount of time where she was on the run. So, whatever, right? We don't get specifics, but my headcanon says that they probably worked several months, maybe a year on the multiversal core, and then she spent the last, let's say, 8 years running from him. Interesting, right? And then this is what I think is cool. The de-aging on Michelle Pfeiffer seems to fit with all this. Let's look at this. So in 1987, when she goes in, their ill-fated mission, that's the de-aging they did to her. Then when she meets Kang, which I'm calling 2008, based on Peyton Reed's statements, that's how she looks. So you can see they've aged her forward. They consciously, made her look older than when they had de-aged her when she went in. That's pretty cool. Then whenever the multiversal core is repaired, and right before it's destroyed, that's how she looks. Now, granted, that looks a little older, but also she might just be really tired. It's hard to say, but that's implying maybe it is several years, 2-3 years. And then, of course, this is what she looked like when she was rescued, which no de-aging for that. That was just, her. But I think that's really cool that they took the time to de-age her differently to indicate the passage of time. So, yeah, anyway, it's all just headcanon and guesses because they didn't give us specifics, but I think that's pretty cool. Okay, so what else does Reed tell us in this podcast? Well, he says the same thing he said in lots of places, which is we have an instant connection with a now 18-year-old Cassie Lang. But I think the reason I use this particular quote is he makes it clear she is now 18, not turning 18, which he said in some other quotes, but specifically she's 18 at the time of the movie. Does that work? Do we get any indication in the movie that she's 18? Yes, we do, because she appears to be being held in a county jail, at least according to the phone. Of course, Scott would know, right? Because he was in jail several times. So he would probably have the county jail on his contacts in the phone. But anyway, she's held at a county jail. Even more importantly, she's held in a cell with other adults. In fact, adults of different sexes, too. I mean, I guess we don't know how they identify, but I'm saying they look male and female. So in other words, she was in a jail cell with lots of different folks, and clearly adults. And BEJT, the research man, found that according to the San Francisco Police Department procedures, that would be illegal to do that with her unless there was no other alternative, because the procedures say a juvenile is any person under 18, and from a procedure standpoint, members of the police department should avoid bringing juveniles into any police facility, including district stations, that contain a lockup for adults. So not only was she put in a place where there were other adults, she was put in a cell with other adults. So this, to me, canonizes that she is indeed 18 when the movie starts. Okay, great. Love it. All right, what else do we know? Well, we know from Wakanda Forever that Scott is on a book tour. And Wakanda Forever has been dated in May of 2025. So it would make sense that this, assuming it's after Wakanda Forever, which we're going to see in the placement where I originally thought it was at least, then this makes sense. He's still on that book tour because there he is. He's on the book tour in Quantumania. And this is different than the podcast that we learned about in Miss Marvel. Remember in Miss Marvel, he's doing the big me, little me interviews, which is pretty wild. I mean, Scott's doing podcasts. He's writing a book. The dude is really cashing in on having been an Avenger. So, and that goes with the theme of the movie, right? That Cassie's like, what have you done lately other than pretty much just making money off this? And the book is for sale, by the way, and it's still listed at September 5th of 2023, so I'm really excited. The Timeline book, by the way, has moved back. For anybody who hasn't seen it, if you go look on Amazon now, it has been pushed back to late October. I think it was October 23rd, but anyway, late October. I'm okay with that. If they need more time to get the Timeline book together, take it. I'd kind of like to read this first, in fact, because this is going to give us some hints about the timeline. Obviously, he's going to talk about his story, about his life. So I'm really excited for this book. We'll get a chance to read it, then we'll get the Timeline book. So the question, though, is he still on the tour, or is this just like a one-time gig to help the bookstore? Or maybe he's being paid, probably. Knowing Scott, he's being paid. But this could have been something that has nothing to do with his book tour. It fits if it's not long after Wakanda Forever that he's still on the book tour. But perhaps if this gets placed later in the timeline, this was just a one-time thing. We'll talk more about that later. But you notice even from the billboards there, it doesn't say it's part of the book tour. It just says it's a book reading, come meet the author, etc. The most important thing is, though, wow, now I'm so excited that there was a scene that I missed in the original movie when I watched it in the theater. But man, you can really read the dates. You don't have to zoom and enhance. I didn't do anything special on this. It's clearly July 24th on both of those. I think whenever Marvel does put a date, and it isn't an accidental date, it isn't a date where you got to zoom and enhance and really work hard to see it, I think they mean for you to use it. So I'm pretty sure this firmly established as the beginning of the movie is in July 24th. And we're going to see how that relates to Cassie's birthday. But the key is she's 18 by the time you hit July 24th. That's important, and we will come back to that. All right, so also it's interesting, the epilogue, when they come out of the quantum realm, notice Scott's still got some of his injuries on his forehead there. You can see him. They're better. They're healed up some, so he's definitely had some time to heal. But it seems like it probably isn't too long after the main part of the movie. So if the main part of the movie on the left is in July 24th, we don't know the year yet. But then maybe this is in August on the right. It's had a couple weeks for it to heal up. It's not real clear, but it kind of gives you a general idea that things are pretty well tight in the movie, and it's happening within the time span of probably a month or so from the beginning to the epilogue. All right, this was an interesting thing. I was surprised when she said that some of the homeless camps still exist due to the blip. Because remember, she was clearing out a homeless camp, and that's how she got arrested. Now, I will say this. While this seems, no matter what year it's in, because it's clearly at least 2025, that's a good 2 years after the blip. So to think there's still people displaced from their own home, 2 years later is strange. But I will point out, homelessness is a really tough situation. Not everyone is homeless just because they couldn't get their house back. I'm guessing some of them are homeless because once they lost their house, they turned to, substance abuse, drugs and alcohol. A lot of our homeless community is hooked on some type of addiction. Also, some of them were on meds and lost their ability to get the meds, and now they're getting untreated dementia or schizophrenia, etc. So in the real world, the homeless camps, if you visit, I have visited homeless camps and gone and done feedings and bringing them food to try to help. Not everyone there is homeless by choice. Some of them are homeless because they just can't live somewhere else. They can't function well enough to have a home, either, again, because of addiction or mental illness. So I don't know that this is necessarily saying these are people that legally didn't get their home back. I'm just bringing that up, but it is interesting. It is interesting. All right. So let's look at Cassie's age, because I do think Cassie's age is very well laid out, and also I do think it was retconned by the movie. So let's look at what it was before the movie and then after the movie. So in Ant-Man, they don't give us her age, but they do tell us it's her birthday. And it's really interesting because Scott shows up unannounced. He was not invited, right? But he still showed up. How did he know when to show up? Because that was probably her actual birthday. So my guess is we saw her birthday in the movie. And we get an idea of when it might be, because WHIH Newsfront did a newscast about Scott's release, and they literally give the date. He's going to be released on July 17th. So if you move a couple days forward for his working at Baskin-Robbins, remember, and then getting fired, etc., July 19th, July 20th, somewhere around there. And remember, we saw the July 24th date in Quantumania. So my guess is her birthday was a few days before Quantumania. But anyway, July 17th. So you might be saying, what is WHIH Newsfront? What are you even talking about? You can actually see them. They are on Disney Plus under the extras. There's one of them that's not on there, which is kind of weird, but most of them are there. You can see 4 of them down there. So check them out if you've never seen them. They're kind of fun. They just give a little bit of in-universe extra information about the movie. So anyway, I think they pretty much firmly establish when he gets out of prison. So they don't give us her age, though, in Ant-Man. However, in Ant-Man and the Wasp, we learn that she is 10. Because Scott says, hey, you try and entertain a 10-year-old when you can't leave the house. You know the lengths I've gone to? Close-up magic. I learned that. So, great. We get an age for her. Now we know she's 10 in April to May timeframe of 2018, so we can backdate that to she turns 8 in the Ant-Man movie. And most importantly, in the final scene, when Yellow Jacket attacks her, she would be 8 because she's had her birthday. Okay, awesome. So she was 8 then. She's 10 in Ant-Man and the Wasp. We can move her to 16 in Endgame, which is in October of 2023, by just advancing her age. And then voila, perfection. We know the movie of Quantumania is in July, in fact, July 24th. And she would indeed be 18 in 2025. So you can see why it worked out so perfectly for her to be, or for the movie to be in 2025, right? Boom, done. Then, and then you throw in, remember I said in the interviews that Peyton Reed has said she's going to be 18 in the movie. And this is where I was a little confused by that, the way he phrased it, meaning is she turning or is she already turned? But you saw he said in the earlier podcast, she is 18. Okay, great. So she's 18, July 2025. Now, they made it a little confusing because remember in the epilogue, they celebrate her birthday. And you're like, wait, is it her or her birthday, as the case may be. But it gets a little confusing, right? But remember, she says, Dad, it's not my birthday. And he says, yeah, I know, but I missed a few. So my guess is they come out of the near-death experience in the quantum realm. It's now August, right? Because you can still see even his injuries on his forehead. It's now August, several weeks later, and they decide, you know what? We're going to celebrate some of those birthdays that I missed because I was trapped in the quantum realm and in jail. And in fact, remember, at the beginning of the movie, he talks about missing some of her birthdays. So it works perfectly. But I just didn't want there to be any confusion that she was having a birthday after the movies or during the epilogue. This is celebrating the missed birthdays. So she's 18 in Quantumania. Perfect. In fact, once again, just to summarize how perfectly this all is, she's 8, then she's 10, then she's 16, then she's 18. July 2025, ship it. Done, right? We got it. We got it. And then throw in a few more things. Nate Moore, I know Nate Moore. Nonetheless, Nate Moore, in an interview about Wakanda Forever, says it's almost concurrent with Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania. Well, that works perfectly, right? 2025, July 2025. Yet another reason that it's perfect that it's July 2025. So look, this is Disney Plus. This is their timeline with the years and months that I believe each thing occurs. But most importantly, the order shown here. This is the timeline on Disney Plus. And there it is, right? It's basically the same time as Wakanda Forever. Perfect. Everything works. And the book tour, remember they even said, the book tour, that Easter egg said the book tour was in Wakanda Forever. Sure enough, just a few months later, he's doing it in Quantumania. The world is a beautiful place. Then you throw in this. This is kind of fun. In Miss Marvel, they mentioned Scott and Hope had a vacation. And you can see that when she posted this, it was 2 weeks ago. So you can imagine, oh yeah, that makes sense. So you have a Quantumania, they go through a near-death experience, they come back and they go on a vacation, which then Miss Marvel in September of 2025 posts about. Oh my, it just all fits so perfectly, right? I mean, this is why everybody assumed July of 2025. And then Disney Plus did this. Disney Plus places it after the Guardians of the Galaxy holiday special. So that clearly puts it in 2026. There's no way it's in 2025 anymore. It's now in 2026. So everybody was just scratching their heads. Now, I know that right now, a ton of people watching this video are saying to themselves, dude, the Disney Plus timeline is just jacked. Why do you even care? It's jacked. It's wrong. It doesn't matter where they place it. Well, here's where I will just challenge that. If that's what you believe, that's okay. And I don't mind. Believe what you want. Put in the comments what you want. It's okay. We can disagree. But here's my point. This is the homepage to Disney Plus, at least in the US region. This is the homepage. And what is the first thing you see on the homepage? The timeline order. Why on earth would they want this to be jacked? I'm not saying it isn't. I'm saying, though, why would they want it to be? So people have theorized, oh, they're just randomly putting stuff up here. Why? Why would they do that? It's the most visible thing on Disney Plus. People write articles about it. As soon as something drops on there, everybody's waiting to see at 3 a.m. Eastern, at least, where is it going to land? Also, they do have a timeline book coming out with a foreword by Kevin Feige. That dude, the guy on the right, why would he want Disney Plus to be different than the timeline book? My theory is that the timeline book will be very similar. Maybe it'll be different, and then they'll update Disney Plus. But for the most part, it's going to be very similar because there's just no reason. Who wins in a scenario where the timeline book completely contradicts the Disney Plus timeline? No one. No one wins. Everyone looks silly. Disney Plus looks silly, and much as I love him, Feige, you would look silly. Because all he would need to do is just tell the Disney Plus folks, hey, I know it's your app, and I run Marvel Studios, and you run Disney Plus, but here's where we're going to say it is, so why don't you put it in the same place so we don't all look silly? So anyway, that's why I have such high regard for the Disney Plus timeline, and I try to shape my timeline by figuring out their placements, right? Okay, is it possible that this one line in the movie has retconned everything up to this point in the Ant-Man trilogy? Dad, a guy dressed like a bee tried to kill me in my room when I was 6. 6. So, of course, she's talking about this when Yellow Jacket attacked her, and she's saying, I was 6. Well, that is not how the math works out, assuming that Scott was right about his own daughter in Ant-Man and the Wasp. And I will tell you, as a father myself, I don't round up my kid's age. I don't change it. I know how old my kid is. But people make mistakes, and I get that. Anyway, this is no longer right. There's just no way, because he said she's 6. All right, well, let's look at a quote from Newsweek. And I've talked about this in an earlier video, but it's worth looking at again now with reflecting on this. So he says there was someone specifically recently, I can't remember who it was, who was tasked by Marvel to write that official timeline of how everything progresses. And there's the whole Earth 616 timeline, and now you're into multiversal stories. And then, of course, there's the weird 5-year gap in Endgame. It's impossible to tell. I mean, all I know is this movie takes place in the present day, and because of that 5-year gap, Cassie is now 18 years old, so she was 6 in the first and 9 in the second. So my answer is present day. Okay, now he's given us 2 contradictory facts. She's 18, we know that's established in Quantumania, but she was 6 in the first and 9 in the second. Wow, he really did retcon his earlier movies. Then I was suspicious because of this part of the quote, though. He says, I can't tell you. You pick a year. You're going to have to go home and do the math on this. You're going to have to figure out the timeline. I love the fact that he tells the interviewer they've got to figure out the timeline because he has no clue what it is. He says, everybody thinks there's a sort of safe room at Marvel where there's a big chart where it happens. But there is someone at Marvel whose job it is to keep that timeline accurate, but then sometimes it's thrown out the window. So I admit, when I read this quote, I thought, nope, dude's drunk. He just showed up drunk to the interview, doesn't know what he's talking about. However, then Disney Plus places Quantumania in 2026. So I have to go back and say, okay, they might just be retconning the movies. So this seems to be what Peyton is saying. She was 6 in 2015. She was 9 in 2018 in Ant-Man the Wasp. We can then advance her age then to 15 in Endgame. And sure enough, she's 18 in 2026. Now, this retconned a couple things. Number one, it retconned the fact that she would have been 8 in the first Ant-Man movie. And the only way 6 works is if she's referring to her age before her birthday. But you know what? In her mind, it was all the same thing. I mean, she was 7 for 2 days before Yellow Jacket attacked. Okay, so she got it wrong by 2 days. Likewise, it's saying that Scott rounded up his daughter's age to 10 in Ant-Man and the Wasp. I don't know why he would do that, but apparently so. Okay, and it also moved her birth year forward. Now she's in 2008. I didn't call that out earlier, but notice on the earlier timelines, she was born in 2007. So this literally had to move her birth year forward a year. Okay, I have to accept that this is what it is because they have clearly placed Quantumania in 2026. Now, there is another clue, another timeline clue as to why this may actually be accurate. Scott says Endgame is a few years ago. He walks in at the beginning of the movie into the donut shop, or into the coffee shop, sorry. Oh, they probably have donuts. They do have the donuts. It's a donut and a coffee shop. Anyway, he says it's been a crazy few years. And hey, guys, for everyone. So he's referring to Endgame. You know, it's been a crazy few years for everyone. Well, okay, I don't want to get into like dictionary definitions on something that may have just been a random word they chose, but I'm going to do it anyway. If he'd said a couple years, couple is 2, obviously, right? 2. A few, then normally you use that if it's more than 2. You would say a couple if you meant 2. You would say a few if you meant 3 or more. So it's not exactly 2 years or 3 years since Endgame, so you can probably round it in the middle. But yeah, this kind of makes sense. If we now move Quantumania to where Disney Plus has placed it in July of 2026, it's 2.5 years since Endgame. So you probably would say a few years at that point instead of a couple. Okay. I mean, it's just one line. I get that, but it is one more indication that this is actually what they intended and that Peyton Reed was not indeed inebriated at that interview, but was actually correct. At least was retconning things and moving everything forward. But why? I still have to ask the question, why? Was this an accident or was there an intent? Okay, let's talk about that. So this is my circuit board drawing of phase basically 4 and now some of phase 5. And it shows some of the different connections between things. So I haven't put Quantumania on here yet because I want to show something first. I want to talk about really briefly Thor because I get asked about this all the time. Thor is the weirdest placement on Disney+. They put it in October of 2025. Basically. And there's no way it can be in October 25. That's way too close to the Guardians holiday special, and Groot's growth pattern seems really weird. I mean, we know that the Guardians join with Thor after Endgame, but we also know that Jane Foster is referred to as Lady Thor in She-Hulk. So if the entire movie was in October 2025, then that would make no sense whatsoever that someone knew who Lady Thor was in She-Hulk, which we know for certain ends in August because they show us a date in the movie. That's really clearly. So here's what I think is happening with Thor. I think Gore takes his vow shortly before the movie starts. And so February 2025. We know that Jane has a blood test, her final blood test, before she heads to New Asgard on April 30th. They make that really, really clear. So then she heads to New Asgard. Meanwhile, Thor is with the Guardians. I think that's probably now in May of 2025. Then he shows up and meets Jane in New Asgard in 2025. They find eternity at the end of the movie. I think it then probably jumps forward a little bit to Thor and Love at the end of the movie, jumping into action and going to fight as a team. Then I think the entire movie is a retelling of the story by Korg. So it's a weird thing for Disney Plus to use that as the placement, but I think that's why they put it in October of 2025, is because the entire movie is being retold at that point. So I just wanted to bring that up because that seems to come up a lot. But notice now that's why I have Thor really above Moon Knight, Wakanda Forever, and She-Hulk, because I think from a watch order, you should watch it first. I think it happens first. It's only the tail end of it that's after She-Hulk. So that just shows also why the timeline order isn't necessarily the watch order on Disney Plus. It's the order that it's saying Disney Plus is saying things happened, yes, but it's not necessarily the best watch order. I think you should watch Thor before you watch those. All right, anyway, enough of that digression. I hope that makes sense, though. And if not, let me know in the comments. I'll be happy to talk about it more in the comments. But okay, so Quantumania, July of 2026. So we know it's connected to Loki because Kang appears, presumably tied to what went on in the Loki series, obviously. We now know the vacation alluded to in Miss Marvel. Well, it's after, it's very early. It's very early before Miss Marvel. And then they appear in Quantumania. So they go on vacation, as she describes in Miss Marvel, and then the Miss Marvel series happens, and then they appear. So I'm just doing that to show that clearly the vacation Miss Marvel is talking about is before Quantumania. And then the book tour, right? The book tour in Wakanda Forever. Either he's still on it a year later, I mean, he is really famous, or again, it was just a one-time dealie he did for that bookstore. That's very possible too. All right, so here we go. That's what Marvel has shown us. Now, why? Why do I think they did this? Well, first of all, I think it's really cool to see we're getting a big picture now. Look at this big picture. So first of all, everything highlighted is multiverse. So these things are all tied together, right? I mean, people have said Phase 4 is not connected. It actually is more so than we think. So here's everything that's multiverse. We have the street-level heroes, Spider-Man, Hawkeye, She-Hulk, and of course Daredevil showed up in She-Hulk. We have the political stories. There's going to be a lot more of those coming soon, by the way. I'm going to mention that in a second. But we have Falcon and the Winter Soldier and Wakanda Forever dealing with politics. We have the cosmic stories. Obviously, Thor, Guardians, and Eternals. I'm putting Shang-Chi and Miss Marvel in that group because of the 10 rings and the bangles and how I think that's going to end up becoming cosmically tied to the Kree and ultimately probably to Kang. And then we have, call it the horror, the scarier elements, maybe the Midnight Suns, assuming Moon Knight perhaps joins the Midnight Suns. Not much is developed there yet, but Marvel's working on it. Okay, very cool. So everything is connected, a lot more than we thought. But now, again, why is Quantumania in 2026? Okay, so I'm going to move both Guardians and Quantumania off the page. They're onto a new page for 2026. I'm doing that because I think the reason they pushed Quantumania forward a year is it is very multiverse-centric. You obviously have Kang falling into that universal core. I think he's going to come back as the Beyonder or somebody extremely powerful. And we need time in 2025 for all of these street-level heroes and political things to come out. We have Secret Invasion, Echo, Daredevil Born Again, Captain America New World Order, and Thunderbolts. They're all tied together in some way, shape, or form. Val, I think, is involved in probably most of these. And they're political in many regards. Obviously, Secret Invasion is, and New World Order, and Thunderbolts. I think all of these are going to end up happening in 2025 or early 2026. And I think Marvel is pushing the multiverse stuff forward now, so we have time for all these very important stories. Then, if we move into 2026, where we've got just Guardians and Quantumania, that's where I think these multiversal stories are going to be happening. The Marvels, which is rumored to have an incursion, as long as it happens before Kamala's junior year ends, then that means her end credit scene with Captain Marvel could very well be later. Now, this may still be in 2025. Maybe the Marvels is there, but I hear rumors there's an incursion, so I could see them making it later and into 2026. Obviously, Deadpool, major incursions. Fantastic Four, supposedly Kang's in it. Doctor Strange is resolving an incursion. It's rumored Kang is going to appear in Shang-Chi 2, and then, of course, we finally get to Kang Dynasty. So I'm wondering if the reason they want Quantumania in 2026 is they're going to finish out 2025 with the street level heroes and the political storylines, maybe even some more horror storylines. And then instead, we're going to get more of the multiversal stuff in 2026. Just a theory on my part, but maybe it's all coming together for a reason. And therefore, Cassie's one line has reshaped the MCU timeline. If my theory's right, she managed to change everything by saying she was 6 instead of 8. Crazy, huh? Anyway, just my theories. Let me know what you think. I'm trying to understand why they made it 2026, why they felt it was necessary to retcon multiple movies to do it. But perhaps there really is a plan in mind. All right, so also we do have a Discord server. I alluded to that earlier. Love to have you join us. I will put a pinned comment with a link to it. I will also have same pinned comment will have a link to my Google Drive that has the timeline docs, and you can check those out. And also, if you don't mind, like this video. You can subscribe if you haven't already. You can check out more content, and we can all continue to enjoy the ever-changing, ever-growing Marvel Cinematic Universe.